Hello and welcome to Monday's episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host, Craig Fowler, and we will be looking back on the 6 matches which took place in the Scottish Premiership over the weekend. And helping me to do that is my guest on today's show, and that is Craig Cairns. Craig, how is my fellow Jambo doing?
I'm doing very well. Strong start for keeping everybody listening. How are you?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Especially good after the weekend where football was the kind of dominant thing in my social calendar. I went to the game at Rugby Park on Saturday and to be fair, didn't watch the game on Sunday. I did. It was my Auntie Jane's 60th birthday, but there was a distant telly in the restaurant. I had my back to it, so I couldn't be too antisocial, but was able to continue checking to see if Celtic were going to come back from 1 and then 2 goals down against Dundee. And it didn't happen, which means Hearts are now 5 points clear at the top of the Scottish Premiership with a meeting between Hearts and Celtic this coming Sunday at Tynecastle. And yeah, Craig, you're right. I mean, we already get accused of being a Hearts podcast anyway, but it kind of feels, I would say, like we were too much in terms of bending our will to those naysayers. If we didn't start with what is, there's that and there's the Rangers manager thing, and there's the Celtic fans continue to hate their board, and there's a lot to talk about for this weekend. I'm kind of really looking forward to talking about Falkirk's win at Motherwell later on as well. But, just as it was this time last season when Aberdeen were flying high at the top, and especially after they went to Celtic and got that draw, they were the big story. And I think it's fair that Hearts are the big story right now because Hearts keep winning. And now, as I said, the gap is now 5 points at the top. Craig, I think you're the same as me. I think every Hearts fan is pretty much the same. And I'm not really seeing anybody get too carried away yet. We saw it, like I said, we saw it last season with Aberdeen, and Hearts fans have been here before. Been here before in 05, 06. We're here in a similar position at the start of the 2017-18 season, where Hearts had I think it eventually went up to 6 points in total before things collapsed and they finished sixth. So it was very much things like collapses like that, especially if the kind of injury bug strikes its Hearts team and it did to that side, then you never know. Possibly that could the same that happens. But for me, it's just class going to the games now. I'm going to every match I possibly can. I don't have enough loyalty points to every away game, but I'm, asking for every favour going because it's just one of those moments where, and especially after how miserable last season was, and how finishing third, yeah, and finishing fourth and finishing third, but for a lot of that, it kind of seemed like things weren't necessarily that fun either. This is a fun team to watch. It's great that everybody's kind of rallying around the club again. There's exciting times coming kind of further down the road. I still don't think this is going to be a proper title challenge. I think the wheels will come off to an extent. However, with each passing week, I'm looking at Rangers and going, second place is starting to look pretty, certainly within the reach of possibility. But that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm just, as a Hearts fan, just loving, enjoying going to games, loving watching this team, loving celebrating, chanting, "We shall not be moved," everything. How are you enjoying it?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, this time last year I just started a new job and it was horrendous. Couldn't buy a win. I think Hearts were still a week away from. Oh no, actually, I think the end of October was the draw against Ross County. So I think they were still a week and a half or 2 weeks away from the first, for me, experiencing Hearts winning a game in my new job. So yeah, night and day, absolute night and day to last season. You're right, there aren't any or many Hearts fans getting carried away. There's plenty of accusations that Hearts fans are getting carried away, but I think it is just exactly what you're saying, just riding the crest of the wave while it's there. There's still so many hoops to jump through, no pun intended, before Hearts are serious title challengers. Still not completed first round of fixtures. Need to go a second round of fixtures with the basically the reverse of the first round of fixtures We still have to see how Hearts respond to defeat, to a game where they've maybe not had it all their own way and they're chasing a goal late on to maintain their lead or whatever or catch up or whatever it is. We've still not seen Hearts in these scenarios. So right now it's a momentum that they're carrying. Who knows how long it lasts, but I think the big test does come when there is some sort of adversity. It's always how quickly you get back on the horse, basically, that defines whether you're serious about this or not.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And looking forward to next week. I've said already. I said before the Killie game, I was like, I think Hearts are going to win their next two, and then everybody it'll go to 8 points. Oh, I didn't think it was actually going to be 8 points at that point. I thought it would
Yeah.
be five because I thought Celtic would have beaten Dundee. Now it would be eight. That's the stage where everybody then starts to lose their mind, and then we follow up with a defeat at St Mirren and a 0-0 draw at home to Dundee. And then that's the adversity you're talking about, and then we can see what this Hearts team is made of.
Yeah, exactly. Although, and like people keep making Aberdeen comparisons to last season, and I've heard this point elsewhere, and it just came up on the recording that I was doing just before this. So I'm kind of repeating something else I've heard, but there does seem something a lot more sustainable about this than the Aberdeen team from last season. Not that I saw that Aberdeen collapse coming, but like, with hindsight, there looks something more sustainable about this Hearts team. You can't really see what happened to Aberdeen happening to this Hearts team. Not that I don't mean sustainable in the sense of maintaining the spot at first place, more that they'll be a good team in most matches throughout the season. I think there will be a level of performance there, if not always the result.
Yeah, they're more unlikely to lose or not, fail to win, and pretty much all except five of their remaining games after November. Basically,
Mhm.
that's kind of what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. Now I'm trying to think to the Aberdeen team last season, and
I don't
I
think there was
mean,
as much in reserve as there is, and I know that there's quite a lot of unknowns in the Hearts. In reserve for Hearts, there's still a lot of unknowns there. But I just don't remember Aberdeen squad having the same depth as this Hearts squad does.
there was it's certainly an issue last season for Aberdeen when they fell off was their centre halves. So they started the season with Malloy and Rubezic, and now you look back to that, that's kind of one of the ones in hindsight where you're like, yeah, that was not sustainable from them to be a centre half partnership for a team that were going to stay at the top of the table. There's certainly
Mhm.
other factors I did not see. I always thought the Aberdeen team was better than what they showed from that point forwards. I didn't think it was. I thought they were a good side. I didn't think the collapse was going to be anywhere near as much as it ended up being.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, you're probably right. Just because the fact that this Heart squad is absolutely massive, and there's guys like Will Kurjota who came on in the derby was the kind of him and Halkett, obviously Halkett getting the goal, but he was the other hero of the derby with that brilliant cross for Halkett in the last minute. He doesn't even play a second of the game against Killie, which I've realised I could have failed to properly introduce by saying that Hearts defeated Kilmarnock 3-0 at Rugby Park on Saturday evening. Goals from Craig Halkett. Again, Halkett scoring for the third game in succession, and Claudio Braga getting back on the goal trail with a double around the hour mark in the second half, and then the last 30 minutes was a non-event. Kind of shifted our focus from this game as to rather away from whether Hearts, how long Hearts could sustain this or not, because I mean it's impossible to kind of tell a lot of the time. Your cynicism is saying that it's just going to fall off immediately, but at the same time, it's hard not to be. We're just desperate in this country for somebody to put in a proper sustained challenge that runs throughout the majority of the season, and yeah, that's why the kind of media are kind of clinging on to it, and that's why we are kind of starting the show with it. But we have, 30 odd years of evidence that
A
it's good to
long way to
follow.
go.
Yeah, it's a long, long way to go. But let's get into the nitty gritty of this game. Hearts 3-0 victory at Killie. I take it I was in attendance, but I was in the second row and I'd had several beers before the game. So it's one thing I will say for being in the second row, you really realise a lot better. You really kind of respect a lot more how quickly Scottish football moves in terms
Right.
of like how little time you have on the ball when you're that low
Mhm.
down. It really does kind of come to the fore, like how much just the speed of the game and any bad touch, how quickly it can be punished upon, which happened with the two early goals. But assuming you were at the match or at least watched it as part of your job, what did you make of the game?
Yeah, I was there. I thought that it was. I thought Kelly started and ended the first half better. The Devlin chance aside, right on the stroke of half time. And I thought that the difference between Hearts being ahead at half time and it being level was a set piece when Hearts were on top, and Hearts get that goal when they're on top, and it shows you how important set pieces have been for them this
Yeah,
season. So many games they've scored set pieces in, or if not, then from the second phase. I think something I've noticed this season. Don't know if it's an instruction or not, but if the opposition clears a set piece, Hearts players are always looking to get it back in as soon as possible. They must be told that get that ball back in the mixer within 5 seconds or something like that, because sometimes they're just hitting it back on back in on the turn and things like that. But yeah, set pieces have been huge for Hearts this season. Craig Halkett and Stuart Findlay now have 9 goals between them. I know that including the League Cup, but it took Hearts 12 matches as a team to score 9 goals last season, and the centre halves have done it in 13 matches this season between them. And as I say, the set piece was the difference, really, and that allows Hearts to come out and settle in and play their game a bit more in the second half, rather than it being, well, we need a goal now. There was no pressure for Hearts to sort of show that they were the team at the top of the league, if you see what I mean.
yeah.
And I think the second half was thoroughly dominant. I know it comes from Hearts pouncing on 2 mistakes, but there was a lot of quality in how they took the goals. And I think it fitted into the wider theme of the half. I think Hearts were just far and away the better team in the second half and deserved it in the end. Although the 3-0, it wasn't quite a 3-0 game, even though Hearts thoroughly deserved it.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Yeah, Kelly started off the better side. First 15 minutes, thought, this could be, maybe it's time for a change, because it was the same Hearts starting 11 for the fourth game in a row. And I was starting to think after about 50 minutes, maybe it's about time for a change. But I wasn't panicking too much. I was like, right, it's only for 50 minutes. You're playing away from home. This team's going to be up for it. It's a nighttime game. So, and obviously there was a wee bit of kind of edge about it as well with Derek McInnes coming back after Kelly fans weren't entirely happy with how he left them to join Hearts at the end of last season. But after Hearts scored, and Hearts do get the boost for that and play better themselves. And for that point on as well, like I thought Halkett was outstanding, Braga was outstanding, but I think the kind of key to the game was Cammy Devlin and Benny Beningame. Like I say, the first 15 not that great. Kelly kind of had the better of the ball, better of the territory, but then they really were able to take control of the match, and both of them were superb. Both of them put in excellent performances. Devlin's form right now is, I mean, he goes through these wee runs, doesn't he, in a Hearts jersey,
Mm-hmm.
where he has periods of 2, 3 months that he never seems to sustain over a longer period. But sorry, my cat just attacked me. But yeah, they two were outstanding. And but what was surprising I felt was that Kelly I was surprised by how much the goal knocked the stuffing out of them, and I think they were kind of quite like almost like oddly passive from that point forward. And like in terms of like Hearts were just like even with the two-man midfield against the three, Hearts were dominating a lot of the ball, getting a lot to second balls, and Kelly also as well kind of resorted to knocking it long. I thought sometimes, and that was just easy for Halkett and for Finlay to deal with, and even McAtee kind of like tucking in from the kind of right back position. And another thing as well, and then the more the kind of grew, and then Hearts kind of grew more and more in confidence. As you mentioned, definitely should have scored, and then they started the second half well, and that's what we could see a lot of the time as well when they were just kind of going for the killy midfielders whenever they kind of got the ball with their back to the rest of the play. They were just on them in a flash, forcing them into
Yeah.
mistakes, and I mean, very kind of different in the end into how the goals were scored, but in terms of the build up to goals 2 and 3, they were almost carbon copies of each other.
Yeah, I thought that just to go back quickly to that first initial spell that Kelly had, I still thought that they'll be disappointed with okay, they were the better team for that spell, but probably be disappointed that they didn't really trouble Swallow too much
Yeah,
because there was the Watson shot, but it's a very comfortable save for him. Dackers has one where he shoots wide. It's not far away. And then other than that, there was a early set piece to the back post that it looked like Dackers was going to get onto it. He misjudged the flight of the ball. I just didn't think that they put Hearts under that much pressure, and I've still no idea if Swallow, first Hearts goalkeeper to ever get 4 clean sheets in his first 4 matches, no idea if he's any good. Anybody know if he's any good? I have no idea if he's any good. So,
yeah.
I was talking about Kelly there, and I went back to Hearts. But
But,
Kelly, I
to be
think,
fair, actually, to be fair, you could say that he is probably good because it looks he's a goalkeeper that without having to do too much so far in his Hearts career, and with maybe the exception of a couple of flapped crosses against Rangers in his debut,
yeah,
he's looked quite. The defence looks more assured with him in goal. Let's put it that way. Whereas with Kelly, with Eddie Beach coming in for Striek, who was injured, it was a doubt before the game, and then I think tried to give it a go and couldn't do it, and so Beach came in instead, and he looked a lot more jittery. I think it's fair to say.
yeah, he wasn't good for the second goal. He pushes it right back into the path of Braga. That's an unfortunate thing for Kelly. I mean, I don't know how much it would have had a bearing on the game, but or the outcome in the end, I should say. But Strike has been very good. They struggled between two chopped and changed between two goalkeepers last season. They seem to nail it down this season, and it's just a really bad stroke of luck that the annual screening has flagged something, and he's not able to play
Yeah.
because that was one of the reasons for their good start to the season was upgrading in goals, and Strike showed where he was at Livingston that he was a good goalkeeper and he made a good start to this season. And I didn't see him in the matches that he played in the League Cup. That's the first time that I have seen him, and it does on that evidence. It did look like a bit of a downgrade.
Good news for Kelly was that Jamie Brandon came off the bench after his
Mm.
injury spell out, and he had a really good start to the season for them, and gives them a couple of good options at that kind of right wing back position, and also as well, Brandon showed at Livingston that he can play in the middle of the park, so that gives them another option in there as well. James Brown has been playing well for Kelly recently, but he was one of many players in amongst the home ranks who just did not have a good game on Saturday, and quite frustrating for Kelly fans that you're on the telly, it's a Saturday night, kind of prime time kind of game, your old manager's coming to town, and you put in what is maybe the worst performance of the season. But anyway, we shall move from that and we shall go to the game that means Hearts are 5 points clear at the top of the table with Dundee beating Celtic by 2 goals to 0. Clark Robertson opening the scoring and Cameron Carter Vickers with an OG. However, Craig, before we get into the meats and bones of this one, we need to tell everybody about NordVPN. So, Craig, I've, on a few podcasts recently for The Terrace, as we've been sponsored by NordVPN, have been talking quite a lot about the virtues of it, why it's a good thing to have. It could be used for, watching football that you might not have access to. It could be good for when you're abroad to, you know, get past some, licensing stuff where you can't watch certain things in certain areas. You can get around that as well. It takes online security very seriously, and you can circumnavigate those government ID restrictions online that nobody wants to fill out. But I've talked about it a lot. You've lived abroad for a period.
Mm.
Craig, do you have NordVPN?
I do have NordVPN. I am a bit of a VPN aficionado. I've had them since I lived abroad in Canada way back in 2012, just so I could keep on top of TV shows that I would otherwise have not been able to watch while I was out there. And in recent years, I found that Nord's been the best one. One of the things, so I have been quite unfortunate. I've been victim to two, maybe three actually, major data breaches. Probably shouldn't name the company, should I?
No, no, probably not.
One of which was
Just in
like,
case they want to advertise in future.
yeah, one of which was a month before I paid my last payment to them as well. So all my so my details had ended up on the dark web, and NordVPN has a dark web monitor which tells you which of your passwords and things like that have been shared there and things like that. So you can change them. So all round it's a very good product.
It certainly is. And if you're interested in signing up for NordVPN, you could do so with a free 30-day money back guarantee by going to nordvpn.com/terracepod. Once more, that's nordvpn.com/terracepod for a free 30-day money back guarantee. Now, on to Dundee's victory over Celtic. It's safe to say, even with Celtic looking quite lethargic to start this Scottish Premiership season, that nobody really saw this one coming, because Dundee fans had spent the 2 weeks beforehand voting in online polls to wanting their manager sacked. I think I saw in the kind of main Dundee fans forum, it was like 92% in favour of Presley getting the boot. And there was also an open letter posted on that where somebody originally posted it and then listened to kind of supporter feedback and altered it a bit. And it was basically an open letter to John Nelms and basically kind of inquiring as to why decisions have been made, why things are going to shit. And he's certainly taken a lot of the heat from Dundee fans this season. But they go out, they beat the champions 2-0. Craig, I wasn't able to watch this one, as I said at the start. I was busy at a family event, but you did. And how did Dundee manage to do this?
Not entirely sure. I think part of it's Dundee deserve a lot of credit. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but part of it is Celtic are just not scoring with regularity at the moment. We'll come to speak about why that might be, but on Dundee, the result that they got before the 4-0 defeat to Aberdeen, they were all over the place, and you just did not see this defensive performance coming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they did so well, as they restricted Celtic. They frustrated Celtic so well, especially in the first half. The second half, I think clearly when you've got the lead to protect and the clock starting to run down, I think it's and it's a team like Celtic you're playing. I think it can be natural to sort of come off a bit, and then it's natural for Celtic to throw everything they've got at it as well. But Dundee have, certainly in this performance, they had a really solid base. Clark Robertson was brilliant, not just with his goal. Luke Graham was brilliant. Made like an arse block at one point late in the game. And in Cameron Congreve, they've got somebody who looks a bit of a live wire, somebody who can carry the ball up the pitch, somebody who can get the ball, dangerous balls into the box. He looks like the kind of player that they have been missing, or maybe they've been wanting Danda to do, and he's not quite managed it. But yeah, he was certainly a highlight, possibly, arguably man of the match, actually.
Yeah, Cammy Congreve, he's looked pretty good, and he's looked, actually, let me rephrase that. He's looked very good in certain matches. He's a young winger, so I think you know what you're going to get. He's clearly talented, he's clearly got something about him, he's quite aggressive in how he takes on his man, he runs at his opponent, gets balls in the penalty area, all what you want. But then there's like the last couple of games where Dundee lost, and both of them he pretty much went missing. But like I say, he's a young winger, that's going to happen. It's just, show me the young wingers who don't do that, and you'll be showing me the best players in the world, pretty much. So guys who are getting on loaned out to middling, jobbing Scottish Premiership teams are always going to be a bit up and down, but he's certainly capable, and he's certainly that player that Dundee need, that kind of extra spark in the final third, because so far this season, other than him, because Simon Murray's like being in and out of the team. He's had injuries, had illness. He's not managed to get himself really going properly yet. It's also been a team that have sat back a lot of the time. And that is something I wonder after this game. Because Presley, and I wrote about it on Friday, or Thursday for Friday for the Herald column. And yeah, a wry smile when I saw that Dundee were 1-0 and then 2-0 up. I was like, well, obviously that happened after I write 1,200 words on why Stephen Presley's making an arse of this season so far with Dundee. But,
You got
like,
on the dressing room wall.
yeah, but there has been an issue in the sense that they have been really negative, like overly negative. I don't think it's a very good squad, but I think it's still better than Presley's, than the faith that Presley has shown in it so far this campaign. And I do wonder going forward now. I think he's got now. I think that's the best team. That's the other thing as well. He's changed the team up quite a bit. I think the team that he started with on Saturday is kind of the best team going forward. And I think they need to play that for a. Obviously, they're not going to play it for like 12 games in a row or anything because nobody does that nowadays. But I think for the next 3 or 4 matches, he needs to try with this because this looks the best balance system for the team. It does depend on Amari Samuels being good enough to play a left wing back every week. He was good against Celtic, but so far his Dundee career has not really shown that. So that's kind of key to it. But then again, they don't really have anybody else to play at that position. And anything they're trying with anybody else out on the left is not working as well and it's harming the rest of the team. So I think you just have to stick with him out there, hope that this is the start of him putting something together. And then you've got the midfield too. Paul Digby coming back from injury. He didn't look good in the League Cup, but he was good in this game. He looks like he'll sit more and allow Ethan Hamilton to go more box to box. I know that's something that Dundee fans have wanted rather than Finlay Robertson doing that. And, you know, with Murray back in the team up front, him being able to lead the line in more ways than one. And to then have Wesley and Congreve playing off him. I think it all is starting to look together now. Like this could be a plan. What will be interesting is whether Presley continues to let them off the leash to an extent, or at least relaxes it, or whether he sees this plan working against Celtic, in which they do obviously have to sit in a low block and hit on the counter, and whether he thinks, instead of thinking, oh, we could go and we can actually beat Celtic, we've scored 2 goals, they've scored none, therefore my players are maybe better than I thought, we don't have to sit back all the time, or whether he thinks we won by sitting back. So that's the game plan for every match, because I don't think it's worked so far this season. When you look at games like Hibs, like Dundee United, where they've barely done anything. And if you compare, there's games like that where it's not worked. But there has been matches like the Livingston game where he did have faith in the players to go attack the opposition. So it'll be interesting to see what he takes for that and going forward, whether he's able to get a bit of momentum going and actually finally, and for the first time really in his Dundee career to date, build up some credit in the bank with the supporters.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there, especially away from home, I've noticed. I mean, like most teams, I don't see them from week to week, but from what I've noticed, they seem to be a fairly negative team away from home. So I was a wee bit surprised when you were talking. I know you're more saying it from like a sort of Hearts perspective, that predicting them going to Tynecastle and getting a result. Just not entirely sure I see that, because from what I've seen from them away from home, they've been pretty poor. But I agree with you that this shape and lineup is probably a good way to go. Rick Astley was playing it right back in the weeks before this, and I don't think that was really working out. So yeah, this definitely looks like something a bit more suited to the players.
You could just call them Rick Astley there.
Oh, God. Not as bad as Liam McLeod saying Ian Beale the other day on Sports Sound.
Oh, was that instead of Mick?
Yes.
Class. Celtic. Right, the big question with them, I think, is Brendan Rodgers getting too much of an easy ride at the moment because fans are focused so much on the board?
Yeah, I mean, Tony and I were having this discussion, weren't we? And I mean, to rehash my side of it, or my argument on it, is I think there's an element. I think there are some people out there who are criticising him. I don't think there are any or many, not from what I can see anyway, that are thinking that a change of manager is in order or anything like that. But I think there's healthy criticism of some of the choices he's making. I think even with the way he's been hamstrung squad-wise, I still think there's legitimate criticisms there. I don't think he can be. He can't just wash his hands and say, I'm not answerable to anything here." But I don't see. First of all, I don't see from a sort of merit point of view that he's close to having his job questioned. And I just don't think the board at this point, I think they'd be mad to. I mean, there's already a lot of ire coming their way. There was the protest this game, the start of this game, and that's who that was aimed at. I mean, they would be surely inviting more pressure and more criticism on
Mhm.
themselves if they were to get rid of Brendan Rodgers. And I know I know that he's got his flaws, but he's a very good manager. He's a very good level of manager, and I know that Celtic's a big job and a big club. I'm not saying they can't go out there and get somebody good or somebody that can do the job well, but can they necessarily guarantee that they could go out and get somebody of the level of Brendan Rodgers? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I'm willing to be corrected on that.
I,
I'm
I
I'm
think
kind of
it.
spitballing a wee bit there.
I think another manager probably would do better with a Celtic team than what he's done so far this season. And but I think I'm mainly that. I think he's a bit. I think what happened in the summer, he's a bit fed up with that. Also, as
Mhm.
well, since he's come back, it's only really been the first half of last season where they've actually looked like what you expect the Brendan Rodgers Celtic team to look like. I think
Mhm.
maybe his demeanour and his attitude, especially this season, has maybe filtered down to the squad a bit. You do wonder as well whether, as this is something I've kind of thrown out a few times this season, how many of those players, we know Maeda was wanting to go, how many of the other guys are looking around thinking, where's my next move? Is Roger's voice becoming a bit stale in that dressing room? And but at the same time, you're right, and that if they do sack him and they invite more pressure on themselves, then they absolutely have to nail the next appointment. And if they don't, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like, at least with Rodgers, you're still looking at it and going, yeah, they'll be fine. They'll eventually write the course. Rodgers won't want this on his CV where he'll be embarrassed. And, if he's if he manages to finish second in a one horse race, I mean, that would be quite something. He would never be going back to the top tier of English football after that again, let me tell you. So I think there is that expectation that Rodgers will eventually manage to get this team to turn around. But he's certainly underperformed so far this year. And that quote, like, there's no way you go into a race with the keys to a Honda Civic and say, I want you to drive like a Ferrari. It's not going to happen. Yes, Brendan, but you're trying to win a race when you're going up against the equivalent of a child's bicycle. You should be able to at least outrace that.
I I wouldn't have used those words. I agree with the fact that he's been hamstrung with the squad that he's been given. They probably still shouldn't be as quite as bad as they have been, but I think there's just too many matches where they haven't scored.
Yeah.
But when you look at the balance of that attack, they got rid of their best striker in January. They got rid of their backup at the end of the last transfer window, and then they brought in a free agent the day after or 2 days after or something. And then in reserve, they've got an untested youngster. And that's it. That's all they've got through the middle. I know Maeda can and has, but he seems to be a bit unsettled with
Yeah.
what what's reported to have happened. Well, not even just what's reported. He said it himself when he was out on international duty. But related to that, they've got him, Yang, Connecty, Balikwisha. Is there another one? They're all left wingers. They all play on the left, and they don't have anybody on the right. And it's just such an unbalanced attack that they have.
Yeah.
They've been a wee bit unlucky with not having like Alistair Johnston. He's one of their better players, and it's a big downgrade when he's not in the team. But yeah, it's there just seems to be there just seems to be a bit of a malaise across the board. It's not a happy place. The fans aren't happy. The board are under pressure. The manager's not happy. The team needs a bit of a spark. It's not it doesn't look like a that happy a place to be at the moment.
Okay, let's move to our third game, which is Rangers 2, Dundee United 2. Rangers opened the scoring midway through the first half through Teal Asgard, but Dundee United came storming back in the second period. Two goals in the space of 9 minutes gave the Terrors the lead. Christian Trapanowski immediately after coming off the bench, firing it into the bottom corner of the net, and then Craig Sibbald with a belter. I should mention as well that Asgard's goal was a belter also, but James Tavernier, as he so often has, and all the times they've wanted to move on from him, he rescues Rangers late on so they don't suffer. Well, they suffer a bit of embarrassment because it's still another game without a victory this season. That's now, what is it, one victory out of 8 games that Rangers have got to start this campaign? Yep, that's correct. One victory, 6 draws, and a defeat. And another match at Ibrox in which they failed to find the 3 points as well. But, I mean, yeah, it certainly looked like it could have been worse when United took that late advantage. But Tav gets the goal, gets them a point for this, and they now have a new manager. So this was announced not long before we started recording. Danny Rohl, the former Sheffield Wednesday boss, has officially been announced on a 2.5 year deal. Craig, what's your give me your immediate hot take or lukewarm take or cold take or whatever take you want on this hire?
Just, I don't think it's going to. I can't say I know much about Danny Rohl, so this is completely. I'm saying this completely besides his ability or what, but I just don't think it's going to wash with the Rangers fans. I think that he's not the kind of appointment or name that everybody's going to get behind. I think he's going to have to prove himself. Does that make sense? I think
Yeah.
Rangers are in a point now where they're churning manager after manager and they need something steady and they need something to work. And especially the way they started the season, they need something to work right now. And he may well come in and have the ability to do it. He may well do it. But I don't think it's going to be the same as I think people would have been behind Kevin Muscat a
Yeah.
lot more. I think people would have got on board and he might have had some similar performances and results to Russell Martin to begin with. But I think what he would say after games, I think Rangers fans would be more likely to be on board with and give him a chance. I, I feel this is just my instinct, but I feel that Danny Rowe's going to be up against it right away, partly not of his own doing, partly because of the way this managerial search has gone. Rangers have not won another game at home in the Premiership as it's rolled on, and there's no pun intended there. So I think he's up against it. I really think he's up against it early on.
So I definitely know where you're coming from, and you might be right. One thing I would say he's got going in his favour, and I mean this seriously. He's not Russell Martin, and so if he just comes in and at his introductory press conference makes any sort of good impression, I think he's going to have credit at the bank simply from not being the previous manager.
Just
Uh,
walking in a suit, round
yeah,
brogues,
yeah, aye,
shouting,
seriously.
"We are the people."
Even if he doesn't do the last one, if he just does the first two, I think they would immediately be like, "Yep, like this guy better." And it's also so there's that side of it. There's also the fact that they could really, in all seriousness, they can only really likely. I've still got major issues with the squad in general. I'll get to some of them looking a bit better against United, but even still, the only way is up for Rangers now. Whether that will eventually turn out to be second, or whether they'll even manage to claw back Celtic, and when if Hearts start to stumble, they could actually then hold themselves back at a title race. It seems very fanciful at this point in time, but you never know at this stage of the campaign. So yeah, I think it's difficult to tell. Is he on a hide into nothing because he is up against it right away, and it's not a very good team, and from the fact that Gerrard and Muscat turned him down, you also have to wonder about how things are operating behind the scenes and how much control of things Kevin Thelwell has on recruitment and what it's going to look like in January, whether they're going to have money to spend on more players, etc., etc. But on the other hand, I do just think he's in a position where it's like, well, the last manager was expected. Like it's a better position than is it a better position than Martin was walking into? You could argue it's not because they had a transfer window in which to bring together better players than the ones they ultimately signed. But Martin was expected to immediately challenge at the top end, like, immediately challenge for the title. Rohl's not expected to do that. He's just expected to start winning some games with some regularity. And there is the Celtic game coming up in the League Cup, which if he loses that, then yeah, it might already,
Oh, yeah, no.
it might, any small credit that he might have already been drained. But for what I've seen for Rangers fans so far, it doesn't, they're kind of, I think there is a bit more acceptance of this hire than Martin, but with more, or sorry, with just as many kind of, a lot of people still saying I'm not sure about this. They don't seem overly happy, but they're kind of excluding the manager from the criticism. They just don't really like how it's played out in public. The kind of the market they're shopping in for a manager. They're going back to the championship again, and the fact that they were turned down by their first two choices, both of whom would have been much popular picks as Rangers
And
managers.
Rohl initially, if reports are to be believed.
Well, aye, see this thing is this has annoyed me from both sides. Because when he pulled out, it annoyed me because everybody was going, ah, somebody else has pulled out of it. Nobody wants this job, and I was like, surely surely a lot of people are being disingenuous when they say that. Surely you recognise that Roll has pulled out of it because Muscat looked like he was certainly going to get the job. They looked like they were definitely going to hire him, and then wait a month for him to finish winning the title in China. And now, I mean, to be fair, I've seen nobody believe it. But if anybody does believe it, I'd be annoyed that the excuse that he did for turning the job down first time was that he didn't want to take the team too soon for the Dundee United match. But they played in Europe on Thursday, and he's manager now. So that makes no fucking sense.
I know, but look, Fowler, look, he's in a suit.
Well, if he wears a suit, then he'll have credit in the bank.
He's obviously been briefed heavily to wear the suit from the start.
Right, well, I'll say what he's going into because I watched this game back, and first half Rangers were a lot better, much more what you would expect from them against a kind of a Scottish opponent Ibrox that isn't Celtic. Like wave after wave of attack. Asgard looked really good in the number 10, the best I've seen him play since he's come up. Just constantly getting the ball, finding pockets of space, turning, running at the Dundee United defence, getting them on the back foot, getting the fans excited. Even Joe Rothwell, he was playing as more like in a number 8. But he was a wee bit deeper than maybe his best position. But again, he was taking the ball, driving it through, doing things that you wouldn't really normally see him do on the Russell Martin side. In the first half, I mean, I think you can maybe say the one downside is that it was a lot of shots. Kind of famously, everybody said like they had like 31 shots or whatever was across the game. A lot of them were blocked. So there wasn't many clear-cut chances. And even the goal they scored in the first half was a belted shot as opposed to a really good opportunity. So that was probably the one downside, is that with all their kind of dominance in that opening 45 minutes, they didn't create enough clear-cut chances. But you can also credit United for some good last-ditch defending for that. I think Lucas Stevenson had about 3 by himself. But then the second half, I mean, from a Dundee United perspective, I'll get into them in a second. But Rangers, just a huge downturn. None of the, like, really lacking in the intensity you saw. Like, nobody really doing what they were doing in the first half. Like, it just seemed to, they kind of, they looked revitalised in that first period, and that just looked completely drained in the second half. And it was just a bizarre kind of Jekyll and Hyde performance.
I thought the second goal he conceded was really indicative of what you're saying there. Sibbald, the amount of space and time that he's got to control, it's an absolutely cracking finish. It's a brilliant goal. But if you pause it when he's taking that ball down in the chest, there's a bunch of players just standing watching him. And they've barely moved by the time he's put the ball in the net as well. At one point, the referee's the closest player to Sibbald. I don't know. I mean, and I think that was kind of what Butland was getting. I don't know if he was talking about the goal specifically, but he was talking about some players just, I can't remember the exact words now. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was along the lines of talking about them talking a good game, but then not backing it up and like not doing the things that they know they're supposed to do to be a Rangers player, that kind of thing. And I just thought that you couldn't believe it. And they're all just standing around looking at each other afterwards. To nobody even knows who's to blame. Just a sea of space around Craig Sibbald. And even before the game, Jim Goodwin had spoke about how the game was more favourable for Rangers going in. Could have been a wee bit of mind games. I mean, I don't think there's really many mind games going on 15 minutes before kickoff like that, right enough. But he was talking about he would have rather have been playing at Ibrox 2 weeks before, where the mood was a lot worse, where when Russell Martin was still manager and the mood was terrible. He would have rather been playing them there because Rangers would have had their tails up. And they did. They did to an extent, but they still allowed that same old problems from this season to creep back in that second half.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. But we need to give Dundee United their credit as well for it. I think Goodwin made the necessary changes. I'm not sure about the team that started the match. He went for a 4-3-3 system for this one. I can understand why you want an extra body in the middle of the park because United have normally favoured that 3-4-3 setup where you've had Savelj and Camera beside them. And I'm a big fan of both players in the middle of the park, but I think they can sometimes get caught out behind them. It's one of those ones where like you're asking the guys to do quite an awful lot, and sometimes the space between them and their centre backs, especially because none of the centre backs are really kind of players that love to step out with the ball too much. So I think they can often get caught a wee bit kind of flat footed in there. So he went with the three, but it was Sibbald, Savelj, and quite
Ericsson?
curiously, yeah,
Eskis?
yeah, aye, Julius
Aye.
Eskison.
So many of them that have all got similar names.
Aye, and he didn't have a good game, and they didn't have a good game in general. The Rangers midfield three absolutely dominated them in that opening period, but they changed things for the second half. And another problem as well, they just got nothing going. Like when any time they tried to attack, Zach Sapsford, I'm a fan of. I don't think he's a number 9. I'm pretty sure I said this on a recent show. This is another game to kind of back up that point. I think he's a wide midfielder, like somebody who's best coming, playing in the number 10, playing in one of the positions off the central striker, where he can float around a bit more and kind of use that kind of craftiness, that kind of dribbling ability that he's got. But when he's having to kind of play a lot with his back to go and hold it up, I don't think it's quite suited for him. But instead, Nikolaj Moller came on and he was better at certainly doing those kind of things. Winning headers, holding the ball up, giving it to teammates, getting Dundee United further up the park. And they just had a lot more belief in themselves. They just pressed much higher up. They were even improving before Camara came off the bench and helped even more to give them a bit of a foothold in the centre of the park. And from the period from 5 minutes, I would say, before they made the subs, on 66 minutes, and that was when Trapanovsky scored, they were already starting to become on top. And from then until about 5 minutes before Tavernier scored, so that was in the 87th minute, so about 82 minutes, Dundee United were the better team. Like, there was no real reaction from Rangers to to United equalising, and then there was no real immediate reaction to going behind. It was only then they started to play a bit more and started to attack a bit more and started to get Dundee United a bit on the back foot. But for United's point of view, that equalising goal would be quite frustrating to leave Tavernier alone in the penalty area to finish off. It's a great finish again. Really good, some excellent strikes in this game. But he should be alone. Like, famously, Rangers' biggest goal threat over the last decade. It's just allowed to wander into the penalty area with nobody around them. That would drive you mental because, I mean, overall, you can say it was probably just about a fair enough result because United played really well in the second half and Rangers were dominant in the first half. But to go 2-1 ahead with 15 minutes to go, not even look under that much pressure and still concede an equaliser, that's just really frustrating from a United point of view.
Especially when most other teams are getting a result at Ibrox at the moment as well. So it will be equally frustrating, and it's a great chance to put that long run without a win at Ibrox. I can't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head. We didn't mention the Dundee one earlier. That was the first time since 1988 they had beaten Celtic at home. But the Dundee United winning at Ibrox wasn't quite as long ago. I think it was maybe like 14 years or something like that. But a while ago still. So they'll be gutted with that.
Right, let's move on to our fourth game, and that was Motherwell 1, Falkirk 2. The Falkirk Bairns with a huge victory away from home after going behind in the first half. Tawanda Maswanisi opened the scoring for the home side, who were much the better team in that opening period. But, like Motherwell so often, this campaign cannot press home an early advantage, cannot wrap up 3 points when they're on top. And Falkirk very much coming back into this one. Calvin Miller getting the equaliser. And then only a few days after I was joined by John McAnally on the podcast of the Falkirk Daft show.
Oh, aye.
And I asked him
Good
if
guy, John.
Yep, he is. And I asked him if Scott Arfield was maybe about finished at this level. And he said no, because you need guys like him and like Brian Graham who are finishers off the bench. And we talked about, like, did you mean finishers in terms of like able to score goals, or guys who are just wily enough that, and it's obviously now in football it's 5 subs, it's a squad game. Do you need guys who are just a wee bit experienced in the latter moments in matches to help either see you out or to get you a goal? And Scott Arfield came up trumps in this one with an excellent finish on the volley to give Falkirk all 3 points. But we will save the Falkirk chat. Actually, do you know what? We'll start with Falkirk. Everybody's been going on about Motherwell, Craig, this season in terms of being like a breath of fresh air in their style of football. But can we maybe say that Falkirk are the breath of fresh air kings? Well, I suppose you'd have to put Hearts to the side leading the league. But if you're thinking
Well, if you're talking about playing football the right way, then Motherwell and Falkirk are 2 good examples of that, trying to play the game the right way. But yeah, Falkirk have certainly shown themselves to be the kings of that, as you said, over Motherwell in this game. I do think that I don't know. I think Motherwell. Sorry, do you want to talk about Motherwell or you want to talk about Falkirk?
Well, start with. Well, I'll leave it up to you there. What do you want to start with?
I want to know what's happening with Motherwell.
Right, okay.
Because they. Sorry, Falkirk fans. I want to know what's happening with Motherwell because it seems to be very, very common now that they are Jekyll and Hyde in the same game. And more often than not, it's them dominating. Teams can't get near them. Teams can't get the ball off them. And then something happens later in a game where it just completely goes to shit and they can't do what they were doing in the first half. And there's different things that are undoing them. Sometimes it's the keeper. There's a fair few times it's been the keeper, actually. There were a couple of, I don't know if you want to talk about them. There were a couple of decisions in this game that I suppose go against them as well. But the defendant's just rotten. I don't know why they think Brian Graham needs 3 players to mark him. I mean, you're talking about his experience. Maybe that was his experience drawing 3 players towards him to leave others unmarked. It's just wild. I don't know. And I get that teams can be good in one game and bad in the next, and they can be good for a half and then not, or games ebb and flow. But there just seems to be such a wild swing with Motherwell at the moment, and I don't know exactly what it is.
So I think you've touched on 2 of them basically. I've written down 3, possibly 4 reasons for Motherwell and why this continues to happen. The 4th one is the most alarming from a Motherwell point of view. So the 3 you mentioned: goalkeeper. He's not been good this season. He's given away precious goals at crucial times in matches, and that's stopped them from winning at least a couple. In fact, you'd probably say 3 games. Centre back Stephen Welsh was good when he first came in. He's really poor for that opening goal. He leaves his man to try and challenge the ball in the air with nobody really on him. Like nobody kind of physically interfering with him as he goes up for it. He doesn't get it. Then it's an easy knockdown from Ross McKeever for Calvin Miller to score. But they've just, in general, at centre half, like Liam Gordon's probably their best out and out defender, but he doesn't really fit into the system. They've been playing fullbacks in there quite a few times. Now there's Stephen O'Donnell and Paul McGinn who could do it, but can they do it that effectively in a 4-4-2 as they have done in the past as the kind of ball carrier on the right of a 4-3, of a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2? I'm not sure about that. And they also, I think, generally just lack quite a bit of composure in the final third. So they often get into really good areas. Now, Stamatolopoulos has been bad in front of goal this season. To be fair, though, that's kind of been counterbalanced by the fact that Maswarisi has been quite clinical and is kind of overperforming how many goals he should have scored so far this season. So that kind of marries up. But I'm more talking about what happens when they get into opportunities to create chances. Like, we know Longello could run all day long down that flank, and he's great at beating guys, and you really kind of, it demands attention, but his crossing's not good. In this game, Johnny Cotrombus was doing a lot of kind of similar work, more off the ball, but similar work down the right in terms of getting in the great areas, but he didn't make enough happen either. Like Saeed, I mean, he done really well with that goal, and it should have been given. But most of the time, 9 times out of 10, when he's in the final third, he makes the wrong decision. And
I've
they're also,
noticed that quite a bit about them. They do. They're good at getting the ball into the final third, and then they don't capitalise enough. You saw that against even against was it Rangers early
yeah.
on, one of the first games of the
Like it was the
season.
first game, yeah.
Was it?
So there's all that, and also as well, I can add in a bonus one as well. I think they've been a little unlucky. They are underperforming their expected goals this camp. In fact, they're underperforming their expected points this season. They've got 8 points. Apparently they should have 12. But that kind of does come down to things like, I suppose actually goalkeeping errors, that figures into it. Anyway, but I think they have, and you can see in this game, they were unlucky. It shouldn't have been a foul on side. It shouldn't have been, and also as well, like Stamatolopoulos' goal, which was disallowed for the handball. Like, if that doesn't hit off his hand, if that hits off literally any other part of his body, he's scoring and they go back ahead at 2-1.
Yeah.
And do they concede again and it's 2 each? Quite possibly. That's what they've done a lot of the season. But it's things like that aren't quite going against them. The part of it that I think is quite alarming was the night and day difference between the first half and the second half. And I'll credit Falkirk for that in a second. But, like, first half, they just passed it round Falkirk so easily. Like, passed it through the midfield, passed it wide. It was the Motherwell would keep seeing for parts of matches, especially early parts of matches. But how many times is this translated to 90 minutes? It's really not. And because they're quite weak, like defensively, if they're not managing to keep this up for 90 minutes, they could be in a bit of trouble. Because as good as they are, they've not got a midfield that's capable of playing this style and like helping to shut up shop. Like Elliot Watt's been great on the ball. Fadinger's been a good signing. Justice, they've all been great. They've all been great this season. None of them are kind of defensive. None of them are great players defensively. Let's put it that way. None of them are that big. None of them are that robust.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is a case that this style of play is, if it's not a style of play that this team could keep up over 90 minutes, I think they're in trouble because it's the only style of play they have. And if this is going to now just kind of continue happening, then a team that I think a lot of us, through their play early in the campaign and through matches where they look so good and they should have taken more points than they ultimately did, I think we had them penciled in as, a potential top 6 team. They're now in 10th. And before it looked like they were just being unlucky and they were just making some daft errors and they would eventually get over that and results would improve. I'm not as certain of that as I once was.
No,
I would still lean that way, but I'm certainly not certain about it. I think they need to start getting some points to the board now. So at the very least, everybody could continue buying in to this plan.
I wouldn't worry about the league positions too much at the moment, though. With how the league is, it's just so tight. There's not
that is right. That's right.
A lot of teams, and I do think that. As Aberdeen have shown, a couple of results can really, really change the complexion of things at the moment. So, while I'd say there were issues and things to be worried about, I wouldn't worry too much about league position for them at the moment. But you talk about them being a small team and all that kind of stuff. Falkirk are on the smaller side as well. So how did they manage to go the other way, basically? Swing it from being so poor in the first half to being so good in the second half?
I wondered whether there was like a massive change at half time, but there wasn't really. There was one that was important, which was that Sam Hart was taken off and Philip Lisa was brought on. So we saw both of them play at Tynecastle, where Lisa was quite poor. A bit kind of dodgy on. I think it was his debut, to be fair to him. He just no long signed, and he's quite a young guy as well. But Hart is a more experienced player, but he's seen as a left back. They played at centre half against Hearts, and he was quite good. He was not good in this game at all in the first half. Playing in his more natural position of left back, he was the worst player in the park by quite some distance. But it was more just a kind of, you could say, yeah, partially what we've talked about in terms of Motherwell. Did they just tire? Are they incapable of doing this for 90 minutes? But also, Falkirk just like pressed them tougher. Like it was just so easy. Like they were just kind of really kind of passive and, not at it at all in the first half. Chasing shadows. Second half, they were right on top of Motherwell. They pushed the team up in general, higher up the park. Whenever Motherwell try to play their way through the midfield of Falkirk, like you're talking Dylan Tate, Brad Spencer, Ethan Williams was the number 10. He was working back. So was Carell Wilson as well. He was doing a lot of work. And they just made it really difficult for Motherwell to play their way through. And it was another game where, as the match went on, the team, like similar to the Rangers Dundee United game, where the home side, having been the best team in the first half, having gone a goal up, suddenly found themselves not only behind, but kind of within the vacuum of the second half, deservedly behind. Like the second half performance was not up to it, and Falkirk done a lot. Was blaming Motherwell, but also credit due to Falkirk for forcing Motherwell into a lot of their mistakes. And I have to say, so at the start of the season, we were unanimous when we done the preview show. Myself, Joel, and Tony. We thought Falkirk would finish bottom. To be fair, they've brought in more players on loan since then. But however, if you'd said to me, well, the other players they're going to bring in are largely going to be young guys on loan from big English teams, that wouldn't have changed my prediction. I still would have said they would have finished last. So we did think this team would be able to play their football to the effectiveness required at this level because so many of them had been in League One. They have managed to do that. We didn't think they would be tough enough to survive the pressure of being the underdog and going toe to toe with, on paper, stronger teams. They've managed to do that. They've been competitive in just about every single game. We didn't think they'd be able to react well to adversity. Well, they keep coming back from going behind, so they're doing that as well. We didn't think guys like Arfield, Graham, Aguiman, even some of the starters like Leon McCann, we didn't think they would be able to rise to the standards required at the top flight. They've done it as well. So, fair play. There's a long way to go. I'll still, be surprised if they're not, still battling it out at this end of the table for the majority. But for all the kind of things coming into this season I had concerns about, they've answered pretty much all of them. I still think they could be better in defence, and Cole Donaldson having a setback is maybe an issue for them. But it's just a testament to the squad, the culture, the harmony, the game plan, everything that John McGlynn has brought to this team over the past few years. I mean, this is really just how well they've started this season in the Premiership with a team that is largely made up of guys that he had in League One. Just shows you that what an unbelievable job he's done at Falkirk.
The squad's going to really be tested over the next couple of months. So when there's midweek games and then over the festive period and things like that, that's when it's going to become much more of a squad game. And there's going to be a few teams that are really tested around in, and I think Falkirk will be one of them. So we'll have a much better idea of where they are after that, I think.
Yeah, certainly. Right, let's move on to our penultimate match, and we shall go for... Let's go for St Mirren 0, Aberdeen 1. There was only one goal in this game. It came right at the death as Aberdeen won for the second consecutive week. Marko Lazatic with an audacious effort in the 96th minute after Jayden Richardson had been sent off with 10 minutes of normal time. Do you have to call it that now because injury time is too long? Regulation time?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jayden Richardson sent off in the 81st minute, and that obviously hamstrung St Mirren, who were still pressing for a late winner themselves when Aberdeen broke in the counter-attack, and Lazetic with a brilliant piece of skill and an excellent finish to flash it past Jamal George for Aberdeen's second consecutive victory. And Craig, I have to say, I mean, terrific goal. I think he's starting to look like a better bet than Nisbet, who's never really looked that comfortable in Tulin's system as the number 9. I think Nisbet is often at his best when he's just been asked to kind of finish off chances rather than, create as many for his teammates and play his back to goal. I also think as well he's kind of usually looked at his best when he's played alongside another forward. But yeah, so I think that going forward when Aberdeen are putting out a full strength 11. You don't know this one. He might have considered himself the best number 9, but because they're obviously playing in Europe in midweek, there might have been a bit of rotation there as well. But I think for their attack going forward, that would be the best. Him, Auchish, and Carlson, I think, make up quite an effective three together, going by the what we've seen for the last 2 matches. But in general, a huge result for them to keep the momentum going. The follow up the Dundee win, and had they managed to not do that, had they managed to like draw or even worse lose the game, then you could have everybody kind of looking at each other. Confidence dips again. You're thinking, right, okay, we've got that victory, but I mean, Dundee beating Celtic helps, but they could say, well, it was one of the worst teams in the league at home. This doesn't really change anything. Now they've got a bit more. They've got even more confidence. Now they do have European games coming up. However, their next 5 games are 3 of them are at home. Now 2 of them are very difficult in the form of Hearts and Hibs. But they've got 3 games at home and they've got trips to Killie and Livingston. So the Europe will probably derail them. But I think they've now got enough about them, and you can see again in this game, Stuart Armstrong was very effective in the middle of the park. I think they're a strong enough side that they will take some bumps over the next 5, but they'll largely come out of that with a decent collection of points from that, like say 10, and then that'll put them right back in the race for European football, which may sound daft considering they only just started scoring goals recently, but they're only 4 points off third.
Everybody's in the race for Europe.
Yeah, and their squad's certainly good enough.
No, there's definitely quality there. There's no doubt. There was. I think this result's huge for them because I think it would have looked quite bleak. I think it would start to look like the Dundee one was just an anomaly, and then they've got lots of really difficult games coming up, as you've just mentioned, because of the European factor being in there. We've seen how Scottish teams have struggled to deal with that in the past. And this, you get lots of momentum from such a win like this. It causes such a good feel, like that kind of late win like that, when you feel like it's going to just peter out. And not following up the win against Dundee, I think it would have put them in a real pressure situation because they're in Greece on Thursday, then they've got Hibs, like you said, and then all the fixtures are just kind of piling up. I was talking about like Falkirk squad going to get tested soon, so every team in Scotland by the end of the year is going to be playing midweek games. The Aberdeen's one of these teams that's going to have to juggle that a lot more than the other teams. And given their form earlier in the season, I think it was just really important that they put themselves back in that sort of cluster of teams before all these games kicked off. And the goal itself, it's just fantastic. It's goal of the month already. It's just brilliant. Even the celebration, the way he whips off and just chucks it away, it's just all so cool. He just looks really, really cool when he does it. Compared to fucking Trapanovsky, who's holding his up like a dick. I thought that Lazetic and just the scenes at the end, it was absolutely brilliant. As much as I was disappointed when that goal came through, watching those scenes, it's difficult not to smile.
Yeah, definitely. As for St Mirren, I think the big concern for them is 8 games into the season now. How much do you start to worry about the lack of goals? They've only got 5. So Aberdeen have only got 5 as well. But we know that Aberdeen have massively underperformed in front of goal this season in terms of the number of good chances they missed in games. It's similar with St Mirren, but it's nowhere near. Like Aberdeen have underperformed their XG by an absolute mile, and St Mirren it's just like a couple of goals. So for a team with top 6 aspirations, that is a worry. And folk may say, it's St Mirren, what do you expect? They ground it out. That's not really fair. Because in their 3 years of getting to the top 6, only once in the last 3 seasons have they finished in the bottom half of the table for goals scored. They're usually in the top half. Last season they got 53. So that was more than Hearts did. This despite the fact that Hearts obviously have a much bigger budget. And Hearts played 5 games against bottom 6 teams, whereas St Mirren played the top 6 encounters. But there's a few issues with the team. Well, actually, sorry, I was going to say there's also you look at the side and you think they shouldn't be performing this bad. Sorry, I'll get to the issues in a second. That my theories as to why maybe that there is some problems. But you look like Mandron's kind of now showed himself at St Mirren to be an effective 10 to 15 goal a season scorer. O'Hara and Phillips are always liable to chip in. Gogic got one disallowed in this one. He's scored goals from set pieces. They're usually quite good at set pieces in general. The wing backs are very adventurous. So what's happening? I think there's maybe a couple of things at play. I think they do miss Caelan Boyd-Munce. I think they miss somebody just a little bit different. So getting Keanu back as his replacement is great in terms of quality of player for that position. But he's a different type of player. Caelan Boyd-Munce was more cultured, better range of passing, better shooting from distance, better at set pieces. Bacchus is able to do a bit more of the dogged work, and he enables O'Hara and Phillips to get further up the park than maybe they were able to under Boyd-Munce. But sometimes that's not necessarily what you want. Sometimes what you want is these guys coming from deeper so that the opposition team doesn't pick them up as well. And I think the other thing is that they've still to figure out the best partner for Mikael Mandron. I did see that there was a decent write-up of the forward whose name is escaped me right now. Sorry, it was
Lundaloo or something.
Yeah, aye, Dan Lundaloo, who is apparently looking like a bit of a pest, but is he going to be able to hit the goal trail? Because Olasanya, not a huge goal scorer himself, but obviously chipped in a few last season.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at him to be that kind of replacement, that type of different forward, but they've still to really, like I said, still to really properly figure out who is best to partner a Mandron up front, or whether they do go back to the 3-4-3, which they've also used quite often in the past. But yeah, something I wouldn't say quite early in the season, nothing to get too worried about at this stage, but definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and they have got a much smaller budget than Aberdeen, as Stephen Robinson points out. They don't have a set piece coach. They can't afford a set piece coach. They're not spending millions of pounds like other teams. You can get a wee Robinson bingo going on with these interviews before and after matches.
That was the other game where there was a bit of like quote unquote controversy, but I don't think there was any controversy in this one. I thought it was a red card for Richardson. I think he quite clearly kicks out, and the
Gogic one is a foul on the keeper, right? But
no, it was offside. It was given for offside.
Was it? I thought it was given for him impeding the goalkeeper.
No, the referee.
Anyway, does a lot not happen after that? Anyway, I mean, it feels like a lot happens, regardless of what the decision's for. It just feels like there's a lot that happens after that. It feels like it goes into a grey area about whether we're still in the same phase of play or not.
I think they were, because I don't think Aberdeen touched the ball. So I think it's still counted. It never really left the final third. So I think it was still seen as the same phase of play for that. And it was definitely an offside. The VAR told Sports Round that it was for offside, and I'm pretty sure the ref made the signal as well when he came back onto the park that it was offside.
Okay.
And yeah, and I think it was the same phase of play, because I don't think Aberdeen touched it again. I think that still counts. I'm a bit unsure about phases of play as well myself, but I've from what
it's
I've
not
gleaned,
going to be black and white regardless of what it is.
He's definitely interfering with the goalkeeper, and he's definitely offside. So whether VAR should have got involved or not, I think it's fair to say that justice was done in the end. Right, let's move on to our final game. Hibs 4, Livingston 0. Apologies to the Hibees that we kicked off the show by beaming about how good Hearts were and have left you to last when you won 4-0, but it's just probably the least interesting of results. He's pumped. It was a big game for Hibs. They had to get back on the horse after the Derby defeat. But, I mean, at this point in time, the way Livingston are playing, it's only between them and Dundee for what you would say is the poorest team in the league. And Livingston certainly looked like that for periods against Hibs. Even though they knocked the ball about, I watched this back, they did knock the ball about quite well at points, but they never really looked like scoring. And the most standout thing for Hibs was that Thibaut Clige started the game. He was excellent. Constantly, Hibs were just going to him time and again, just putting wee clip balls over the Livingston defence, getting him wrong on it. And yes, it'll be interesting to see what happens there, whether there was just a case of rotation, freshening things up, or whether he's now, with that showing, is able to say that the succession plan that obviously Hibs had their mind on when they signed him, in terms of one day he will take over from Martin Boyle, whether he's going to get the opportunity to do that right now, because Boyle's been okay, I think, to start the season overall, without really thinking too in depth about it. I think he's been fine, been good at points, been not so good at others. But obviously, Cleege has cost £1 million. You know it's going to happen eventually. And this was a very impressive performance from him. And it was him that got the. Sorry, I forgot to read out the scorers. He got the score that started. He then won the penalty for Jamie McGrath to score. And then it was Junior Hoylett off the bench with 2 late goals to put the finishing touches on this one.
We took the goal very, very well, but the first
I
goal.
love a roofed finish.
But doesn't the goalkeeper dive out the way of it?
I think he's expected it just to go across him. I don't
So I
think
was wondering whether he maybe had given him the eyes or something.
Yeah,
Because
possibly.
I mean, even if he does stand still or whatever, maybe because he roofs it, and maybe he still goes in. But it looked like the goalkeeper moved out the way of it a wee bit. But before that is what makes the goal, like the drop of the shoulder, the turn, and the speed at which he does it with. If he can keep doing things like that, then he looks like a great player. And Nicky Cannon back in,
Yeah,
I think
some
probably
dangerous
helped.
balls.
I would say that from a Livingston point of view, that they're really looking like they're missing. Have missed Ryan McGowan, haven't they? That's caused a lot of problems for them.
Oh yeah, I'll actually get to that in a second. Just a couple other Hibs players to give a shout out to. I love the fact that Hoylett's still doing it at this stage of his career. I think he's perfect for Hibs in that just kind of role he does, where he mainly just kind of comes off the bench and he's still got that trickery and the evasiveness to really cause problems. But
Two good finishes, arriving at the right time and finishing them both well.
the other player to praise, and somebody I really didn't think much of before, but I think he's really starting to settle into this Hibs side. He certainly looked good. He's certainly good in this one, and I think been good overall for a bit of a stayed period, is Warren O'Hora. Didn't look like much when he first came in, playing in that back four alongside Marvin Ekpiteta. But since he's played on the right of the back three, as David Gray's preferred that system for basically almost a year now, I think he's largely been unspectacular, just solid. But I think more and more he's getting grown into himself and he's carrying the ball out more and playing more passes over the top. And you certainly saw that in this game. And I think that defence in general is just looking a bit more settled now. Islay played well as well in this one.
Without Big Rocky.
After a dodgy start to the season. And yeah, Hanley is the centre of the back three. And yeah, I think Rocky at this point in time, I don't think he gets into that back into that Hibs team. I think Hanley's just a cooler head in there. Things just look a lot more settled. Rocky is obviously a huge fan favourite. He goes from he does a bit erratic. I think it's almost fair to say with Rocky.
Yes, scores important goals.
He scores important goals. He does some really great things in defence, but he also has really kind of brain fart moments. And I mean, Hanley's it's not like he's never had them as well in his career, but it just seems at this point in time that they do look a little bit more settled at the back over the last, because even the game against Hearts, it was a good defensive performance from him. So eventually,
1 goal in 3 games that defence has conceded.
Yeah, aye. So they do look a lot more settled back there with Hanley at the centre of things. But
and with Salinger in goals as well.
Yeah, him as well.
That's been a part of it.
But to get on to Livingston and talking about their defence. Yeah, well, I think they're really missing Ryan McGowan. So when I talked to Liam Innes on the podcast recently about Livingston and talked about Wilson and McGowan, he said that they've not looked really that. To be fair, I don't know if McGowan's played much without Wilson, but he basically was saying like they look good when they play with each other, but not so good when they play by themselves. And oh my God, Danny Wilson had an absolute shocker in the first half of this game. Like, Cleege looked great, but I would still like to see Cleege go up against like a good centre half and see what he does, because Wilson constantly just let him go in behind him. It was just happening all the time. And we said coming into this campaign that Wilson and McGowan needed to be able to make that step back up to the top flight level. We know before that them as a partnership at Premiership level, absolutely fine, nothing to worry about, good for a team like Livingston. But at their age, would they be able to come back up and be able to put in the performances Livingston would need to have from their centre halves, so that Martindale, as they go back into the kind of defensive shell that we saw the last season when they were in the top flight and they got relegated? It started off looking good, but McGowan's been out now for a while. He posted on his Instagram recently, last week I think it was, that he's been in hospital. He was in hospital for nearly a month He didn't go into detail, but it's some kind of infection that he's needed an operation on, and he's lost 7 kilos. He's not going to be back anytime soon if that's the case. He's going to have to build himself back up. And without him, they look all over the place at the back because they're trying to think like this, the second half of this game. So Shane Blaney came off early as well. I presumed that was an injury. But then when Wilson had to go off because he was that bad and they shifted to a 4-4-2 for the second half, their centre halves were Mo Silla and Christian Montano. And you saw that for goals 2 and 3. Montano, stupid decision, got the wrong side of Cleege, pulled him down, and then Silla getting out jumped by Junior Hoylett in the air for the third. That's not going to go well. And Livingston at this point in time, they're easily the worst defensive team in the league.
Yeah, even the two, just to add to what you're saying, even the two wing backs didn't look too hot. They got dominated by the Cadden brothers as well. So even like looking at the back five as a whole, and Montano, who comes on, was it half time he came on?
Yes, it was. He came on from Wilson.
It's a bit of a defensive shit show, and that's why they're conceding such poor goals. I mean, Martindale spoke afterwards about them gifting Hibs 2 goals. That's part of the reason. It's because there's right now there isn't enough quality in that defence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right, Craig, I think that'll do us.
Aye, that felt lengthy. We don't have a timer here. We usually have a wee timer. I don't see a timer for this one, but it felt long.
I feel like it was about an hour and 20-ish. We did have some problems getting started. And also as well,
we did.
If there are any, I don't know how this audio is going to turn out. If there are any audio issues in this episode, I do apologise. We tried to use Riverside as we always do, but it was not working. Craig could not see me or hear me, even though I can see and hear him. So we had to move it to Zoom. So it's been a while since we've used Zoom. So hopefully that has not distracted too much and the audio has been fine. But until next time, hopefully Riverside will be back up and running again. We should have Sean and Telfer back later this week with another lower league show. Until then, thank you very much for listening and we'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.